All right, so what I'm going to like to do here is start with each of the concepts that were presented in the order that you had them in your packet. You can see the results here now, and then just open it up for some conversation, because we couldn't put everything in the numbers. The numbers don't show us all the comments. You know, in the comments, I think some of these scores might need clarification and some other important items relative. But you can see here on the Pavilion, you got a pretty good concentration in options B and C for preference. We did have a couple of no votes, which is, we don't need, just keep everything the way it is now, which is fine, because that's what we want to find out, what people think about this. So, but we do have a concentration in B and C, and there was one vote I couldn't figure out, so I just put a question mark there. So, if you want to chime in now and give us some views as to how you thought, this is where we'd like to start to hear them. So
I'll make a comment on that just to get us off and running. But B and C, it's sort of interesting. B is what I would say was probably the most organic of the images that were in the packet. C was the most neo-traditional. So that's an interesting blend, I thought, of fairly modernistic and organic and neo-traditional. Yes, sir.
Initially, we didn't see a lot of difference between B and C. They're very small drawings, okay. and we gravitated to C pretty quickly, but you saw the distinction, you created it, but we didn't see in looking at it a lot of distinction.
And that's my job. But, and sometimes I assume people are seeing the things that I'm seeing, and I have to remind myself that we're not all trained with the same eye. But clearly I would say that the B is what I would call an organic, more modernist approach. C is definitely a more neo-traditional type of approach, just so you understand that.
When you're looking at these things, John, you got option B and option C. Option C looks like it could be multi-housing to me. I mean, I don't know, how big is this thing and how much would it cost?
And again, right now, cost and size are not the issue. Function isn't really the issue. It's the image of the structure that fits in that park. Which image, when you walk into that park and look down that green, what image fits that park the best? Forget about what all it's got in it, how many picnic tables and so forth. It's just, what image do I feel comfortable with? Yes?
The difference that I saw between B and C basically is the tower. I like the more modernistic approach, but I didn't think we needed the tower.
I think as an architect, you ought to be able to come up with a combination of both of those.
And that's very possible. Sometimes, I mean, if...
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
That's right. That's right. When you get two that are this close, then that would tell me then we start melding some elements of each to some, so it becomes a little bit of a hybrid, and that's not necessarily a problem either.
You know what they don't.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear that A and D are off the table. We're in a comfort zone here, so I think I get that. Yes.
In our group, we focused on criteria before we even got to B and C, and probably the three keys were it needs to be natural, blend in with the environment. We felt that less is more. We weren't really thinking about a big structure, no matter whether it's B or C or A or D. And then finally, low maintenance should be one of our goals as well. Those were the three things that we focused on. I think we ended up between B and C, if I remember, but those were the three criteria.
Very good.
I think we focused that if we're going to do a pavilion, it ought to be multifunctional, like put the restrooms in there. And we thought that was important, but I'd like to go to the point of that somebody said they didn't question whether we needed it at all, and we were told, forget that question, just pick among the visions. And so some of us would think that's still on the table as to whether it needs to be done or not.
We agreed with a lot of the comments about having an open area, have it look natural. One concept that came up, maybe it's not a concept, more of a function, but the idea of having some screened area in this, because the reality is that we all know certain times of year the bugs are such that, if we want this to be a place that's used, that people actually go to and sit in or whatever, if you can't screen some of it off, people are just going to have days where they say, it's too buggy, I'm not going there. So,
Yeah, and again, that's sort of that's getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit, which I'm not too concerned about today. I mean, we can screen any number of those structures. Obviously, a tent structure would be difficult, but the hard structures, the static structures, we can screen them. That's a detail. And to answer Bill's comment about the bathrooms, yes, it was always assumed that the bathrooms were either part of or contiguous to a pavilion. But here again, if 51% of the people in this room say we don't need a pavilion, then I'm listening to you folks, so I'm going to say, okay, we nix a pavilion. And that's what we're operating with. We're operating with the data provided. The data provided said a pavilion was a desirable feature, as was bathrooms. That was the information we were given. We're trying to validate that now.
Can I just say, I think that no is a little harsh. I think probably most people in here, from what I'm hearing, would almost agree with what we meant by no, which was, do we really need this pavilion? And I'm hearing that all around. And we were allowed to have that option at our table. From experiences that we've talked about, and at least my personal experience, is that I have seen more people use the basketball courts in Drummond Point, and I've never seen a person use any of the pavilions or cooking things over at Walker's Landing. So I think if we talk about a pavilion, if we look at the nature of what Drummond Point is and what the spirit of it is, and then what the space is like now, if there's going to be a pavilion there, it's got to, as was said here, it's got to blend in with what was there. And really the purpose of a pavilion, from what we discussed, was if you're out there and it's raining, you want to get out of the rain. It's not something that's like a building, not another Walker's Landing,
right.
essentially.
Basically, just to clarify a point, because I heard that come up a couple times about the comparison to Walker's Landing. This is nothing in comparison to Walker's Landing. We're talking an open picnic pavilion, literally with a couple picnic tables, a couple ceiling fans to keep the bugs off of you, screening if needed, and a single men's and women's bathroom just for convenience. But it's never intended to be a meeting space. It's to take the grandkids out for a birthday party, and you might have 20 people there, but it's not the event kind of space. That was never the intent, just to clarify that. Yes. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Joe.
just one or two more, Joe, because we got to,
We had two planners here, or two people here, one from Oregon and one from Pennsylvania, 2 weeks ago, and they talked about their communities and what they did to bring their communities up to what other communities in their area were, because they were dying, because they didn't have facilities for the families, for the growing population, or the change in demographics and how people do things. So one of the things that each one of those places built a facility for the community to bring them together at another area, so to speak. But they did it, and they said before they even got halfway finished with it, they did it too small. They were thinking too small. And maybe that's one of the things that we might think about 10 or 20 years from now. Did we think too small for that area? Should it be more than we conceptually think of today, instead of 10 years and 15 years from now?
just one more.
Yeah, we did allow a no pavilion vote, just restrooms, and it was 33% roughly at our table for that.
For which now?
Just restrooms.
For no pavilion. So the strong majority were in favor of a pavilion at our table.
Okay, good.
I mean, we really don't have time for all the comments here, so I would only suggest that, because we've got to move on, is that if you want to have something said and you want to make sure we know about it, write it on your individual pages that you have there, because we're going to collect those things, and John's going to take all this back to his office, and they'll go through them individually, so he'll have an opportunity to see. But you've had your hand up for a long time, so we'll...
As Bev had said at our table, the issue of the observation deck really swung our vote. Is it at all possible to see if there, because The difference between B and C for us was the observation deck. It would, and since C won a lot more than B, is there any way of just now, perhaps open hand, asking if the observation deck was an issue for any of the other voters?
We saw it come up on a couple of the pads up here. And let me explain, we threw that in there, the observation platform, for a couple of reasons. Number one is, if you do get up there, obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm saying that you get over the tree canopy. So now you have an unobstructed view across the treetops, out to the river, to the wetlands to either side, and actually across the treetops to the east as far as that goes. So it was an effort to replace the treehouse. The treehouse that's there now is getting worn out. It's not safe, and there is an inherent liability there with that current structure. So the idea was, well, if you're going to take that away, how can we replace that with something that is code compliant and eliminates a liability? We can do it with a safe stair, with proper guardrails, handrails, the right dimension steps and so forth that do meet current building codes, so you don't have a liability. So you've got this tower that replaces that function and gives you the panoramic view, which is a little bit of a novel idea. And the other thing I didn't bring up, because we keep running out of time, is that we even talked at one point about making this facility a net zero consumption facility.
Yeah, make sure you note those things. I mean, if that's important to everyone here, make sure you put that on your individual pages, and we'll collect them after this session, because it is a key item, and I think it's worth talking about.